All right, so welcome to the conversation abstraction in Bullet Train. We've now dealt with the plumbing that got an Alexa webhook this far, but the point is that webhook could have been an Alexa webhook. It also could have been something else from an SMS conversation or really any other platform that can deliver a message to us. The point of this entire conversation abstraction in Bullet Train is that it does not make sense to create separate conversation logic for every platform. It's not to say that some platforms won't have features that are unique. For sure, you can branch, or there's other methods in other processes that we can use in development as well, like inheritance or subclassing or whatever. But in its simplest form, like there's nothing stopping us from putting branching logic that says, if this conversation, how do we say it? We say channel equals Alexa. Like if the channel is Alexa, do something special. You can definitely do that. But 90% of our conversation logic, I would hope, could be reused across all of these different platforms. And that's the goal of this conversation abstraction. As I mentioned before, when I first implemented this, and this isn't something that's been shipped to production yet, or I should say, this isn't something that has been merged into master for Bullet Train. It's available for folks to start using, but it doesn't have good tests, all that stuff. It's not production quality. This is still a development branch. But when I first implemented this, I picked two platforms, SMS via Twilio and Alexa. And the reason I did that is the difference between those two platforms I felt would yield a good abstraction. So you have voice on the one hand and you have text on the other. And we even ran into one of the things where in the previous video, we ran into an example of something where the abstraction was actually helped by the fact that we involved Alexa so early with this whole thing about asking versus telling, where we have to notify Alexa if we're asking a question or simply stating something, because Alexa needs to know whether to listen for the response, as opposed to text messages, which don't. It can just receive whatever the user sends after it sends a message. So anyway, the point is that I want to introduce this abstraction that we have and some of the constructs that are in place to help us build this type of conversational logic. And then I suspect by and large, we're going to skip most of this right now in our development, just so that we can get to a quick result of, testing things like whether Alexa can pronounce Japanese when we send it that way, stuff like that. All right. So when we get this processing incoming message, we have two different branches. We deal with user registration differently from registered users. So in this case, there's really nothing too exciting implemented by default in Bullet Train. So if the user is already registered and we're waiting for a recursive call after sign up, what could the recursive call be? Well, if it's a recursive call, probably this is referenced somewhere else in the file. So the point is, after the user is registered via Alexa, we set the state of saying, hey, this conversation is now waiting for a recursive call after sign up. And then sure enough, we reprocess the message using the same method. And so we go all the way back up to the beginning. But what's the difference in the way that this is run? Well, the second time we call this method, membership now has a user because the user has been created. And so, yeah, that's a recursive call to this method. But the real thing that ends up being a big part of how we develop conversational logic is this idea of state or waiting for. So the question here is, are we waiting for that recursive call after sign up? Yes, we are. Well, stop waiting and return to the handler, the webhook handler that even sent this stuff to process incoming message. Say, okay, Welcome to the application. We've sent you a welcome email, and that's all we've got for now. The developers of this app will need to do the rest. That's us, right? So this is just a default interaction where Bullet Train does what it does. It handles the handshake of sign up, and then it says to the application developer, hey, okay, it's your turn now. You actually have to implement some conversation logic as an interface for your application. No different than you would implement views, controllers, whatever on the web. So there you go. That's all there is. But the thing there is really the interface that's provided for setting state, so that when we return a message, you think like when we send a text message, the request lifecycle is now over. You've sent the message. So what happens when that user sends another message back? The conversation needed to keep track of what it was actually doing. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do that, but the simplest way is to simply set, the waiting for value. And so you can see here that we are telling it wait for the recursive call after signup. So that's it. Another place where we use that is wait for the sign up email address response after we've asked them, okay, what's your email address? Now, when we ask that question, we want the conversation to remember, hey, that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting for the response. All right, so in our case, I actually don't care about any of this conversation logic at all. I don't care about sign up. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm not keeping track of any user state. Well, I shouldn't say that. We're keeping track of user state, but I'm not doing any user registration yet. I just want people to interact with my skill. So I can bypass all of that logic. I'm going to leave it there because I will want it later. But right now, I can just say, hey, this is working as you'd expect. Alexa, ask the Japanese study language. What is it called? Never mind.
I don't know that.
All right. Alexa, ask Japanese study tool to have a conversation with me.
Hey, this is working as you'd expect.
See that? There we go. All right. So I wish there was some way to actually, let's see if I can get the audio working better on this, and then I'll listen to it and use it as, use this to adjust. Alexa, ask Japanese study tool to talk to me.
Hey, this is working as you'd expect.
Great. Okay, so what I can do now is, last but not least, test if this will support Alexa, ask Japanese study tool to have a conversation with me.
Exclamation mark.
Ooh, so it doesn't work. The only thing it could pronounce was this. All right, let's figure out how we can get our Alexa skill to pronounce Japanese. Ooh, actually, you know what? I don't want to. Let me see if there's anything. I'm just going to double check on this real quick. When we say response, Alexa response, the Alexa there is Alexa Ruby. So let's look up the gem. I suppose what we could do is, and this might be where Polly comes in, if we can't get, all right, so I'm going to have to dig into some documentation or let me just double check. I don't want to waste anybody's time here. So I'm going to do a bit of research and then I'll come back and show you what I find.